Another year had flown on by full of tinkering and making. At the North Pole, in a certain grotto that smelled strongly of baking, the wee elves, all so busy, so jingly and so merry, for Christmas was almost here, which meant Santa was on the sherry. With fireplace all crackling, the sleigh bells softly tinkling, Mrs. Claus felt rather content whilst dusting sugar with a sprinkling over the warm mince pies that everyone knew were Santa's favourite, so you'd have thought the big man would eat slow enough to savour it. But this tale isn't just about Santa Claus and his elves, nor the grotto or his reindeer who watched his helpers stack the shelves. No, this story goes further to a farm we know fondly, where a little cat and her friends find themselves in a quandary. For their excitement for Christmas is the same as yours or mine, and a night of adventure calls beneath the stars that shine. But for now, let's get cozy, all snuggled and calm. Simply lie back and take a deep breath, and welcome to Snooze with Sam. Mortimer Thistlewick adjusted his spectacles, squinting at the antique pocket watch ticking away in the pocket of his velvet waistcoat. It wasn't his. He'd found it nestled between the frosty cobblestones near the bakery 3 Tuesdays ago. Timepieces fascinated him, their tiny gears whirring like captured fairies cycling away on tiny unicycles. The North Pole workshop hummed with a peculiar fusion of organised chaos and peppermint-scented calm. Elves in jaunty striped hats polished sleigh runners with lemon-infused wax, chatting amiably about Mrs. Claus's newly acquired ukulele skills. Floorboards creaked underfoot as Bundlesworth, the head groomer, carefully combed glittering frost from Dash's antlers whilst the reindeer lazily crunched crystallized sugar lumps. Outside, candy cane striped chimneys puffed clouds smelling faintly of gingerbread and the cosiest of wispy hardwood smoke. Inside the main lodge, Santa's chuckle rumbled like thunder as he poured sherry into 2 thimble-sized glasses. Mrs. Claus patted her apron absent-mindedly, leaving streaks of flour on the fabric. The crackling firelight caught the twinkle in her eyes as she recalled little Amara from Reykjavik, who'd requested a miniature volcano that erupted strawberry jam. Across the room, Blitzen sneezed delicately, scattering icicles that chimed like wind chimes, all onto the polished ice floor. Santa swirled his sherry gently, letting his thoughts pour out across his lips. "Remember young Gareth, a lad who always wanted socks that never lost their pairs." Mrs. Claus snorted inelegantly into her drink.
Oh, bless him. Saved us from knitting mismatches till Easter. Oh, I do hope he's getting on okay.
Outside, a choir of penguins waddled past the frost-etched window, singing carols horribly off-key. Santa winced playfully. "Rehearsal's going splendidly, I see." Mrs. Claus nudged his knee with her slippered foot.
Oh, hush now. They're enthusiastic at least. Perhaps with a little extra practice.
He leaned back, the leather armchair groaning in protest. "What about that Tokyo request? The robot kitten that purrs Beethoven, was it?" Mrs. Claus's eyes sparkled brighter than the tinsel-draped rafters.
The engineering elves loved that challenge. You know, they actually added a tiny conductor's baton that actually kept time.
She chuckled, picturing the meticulous blueprints littered with doodles of robotic mice. "Good heavens, my wee darling. What a marvel! I fear that the rate technology is going, it won't be long before it's robot kittens conducting us. Jeezo!" Santa mused, tapping his glass thoughtfully. Indeed. What about, young Laurie and Drew from California? Their intricate request for what was it now? A mini jig-dancing Highland coo or something? Mrs. Claus waved a flour-dusted hand dismissively.
Fluffy logistics, dear. We outsourced it to Elf Donald McDonald's cousin. He's the expert in cooler climates and Highland dancing.
Santa's belly jiggled with laughter, a sound like snowballs rolling downhill. Splendid! Though I hope Seamus remembered the tiny bagpipes. They sipped quietly for a moment, the sherry warming them like liquid starlight, helped of course by the healthily crackling fire, which toasted their noses inside their cosy cabin. Not far away, Blitzen sneezed again, sending crystalline snowflakes pirouetting through the frosty air. Their thoughts drifted naturally westward across stormy Atlantic waters, settling over a wee Scottish glen. Santa then remembered something that stirred him deeper still, and murmured under his breath, swirling his sherry thoughtfully, causing flecks of amber light to dance across his rosy cheeks. His chuckle vibrated deep in his chest. "Ah, wee Morag. That ginger menace who kept trying to bat the tinsel off my boots when I was chatting to Rose. Remember Rose? Her letters always smelled so faintly of heather and hope. Very comforting." Mrs. Claus nodded, a soft smile softening her flour-dusted face.
The poor wee lamb, missing her father so fiercely. Morag was her absolute companion. Bless her. She kept stealing those balls of wool meant for scarves. dragging them all over Black Hill Farm, like she was trying to fly a kite.
She mimed the tiny cat dragging a colossal yarn ball, her fingers hooking imaginary claws, and Santa's eyes crinkled warmly at the corners as he reached out for a freshly baked mince pie. Aye, and the sheer audacity, perched atop the mantelpiece like a furry gargoyle, watching my every move with those wonderfully intelligent green eyes of hers. He took a big bite, followed by a slow sip, savouring the rich sweetness of both sherry and fruity mincemeat. Do you suppose she still patrols that wee farmhouse kitchen? Keeping watch for stray food morsels, no doubt, that might drop from the kitchen counter.
Knowing Morag, she's lately appointed herself Queen of the Stove years ago. She probably demands tribute in clotted cream and scratches behind the ear.
Well, wherever ye are, Morag, here's to a very Merry Christmas. Who knows? Maybe we'll bump into her again. Stranger things have happened.
Fancy a wee top-up, my cuddly wee Santa? You'll be needing fuel come tomorrow night.
You're too good to me, my wee darling. Oh, and mind passing me another of your delicious mince pies over? That'd be smashing, thank you. Over their wonderful memories of years gone by, Santa and Mrs. Claus chatted away into the night, enjoying this little moment of peace just between themselves. It had been a tough year, very demanding on the pair of them in a good few ways. But, as always, their spirits remained high and their hearts full of love and cheer. Their shared chuckle mingled with the quiet tick-tock, tick-tock, echoing faintly from Mortimer Thistlewick's velvet waistcoat pocket. The ancient watch seemed to chime its agreement, a tiny metronome counting down the dwindling hours before launch. Outside, Dasher snorted, a plume of frosty breath instantly crystallizing in the sub-zero air. Under the faintly glowing lamplights and sparkling stars of the North Pole night, all of Santa's reindeer began to get excited for what lay ahead. It was nearly Christmas Eve. Time to get packing. Far away beneath a quilt of Scottish stars, it was the eve of Christmas night, and wee Morag stretched luxuriously on the worn hearthrug of Black Hill Farm. Her purr was a deep-throated engine of contentment, vibrating through the flagstones and mingling with the gentle, tiny snores of Rose, who was nestled deep in her bed upstairs. She had decided to go to bed extra early that night because You know, the sooner you sleep, the sooner Christmas morning arrives. Isn't that still the case? Either way, the lingering scent of peat and fresh Christmas fruit cake hung warmly in the air. With one final, deliberate rub of her ginger cheek against the cool stone fireplace, marking her territory one last time, Morag slipped soundlessly through the cat flap, leaving the cosy fog behind. The crisp December night air hit her whiskers like tiny pinpricks, instantly invigorating. The frost-kissed grass crunched pleasingly under her paws as she padded her familiar route towards the weathered barn nestled beside the old wooded copse. Moonlight, pale and silvery, cast long, dramatic shadows across the frosted fields, transforming ordinary hay bales into slumbering giants. Inside, the barn's comforting gloom, warmed slightly by the resident sheep and smelling richly of dry hay and earth, two familiar shapes awaited. Isla, the impossibly fluffy Highland calf, shuffled her hooves eagerly, her breath puffing out in thick, excited clouds. Fox, sleek and russet-furred, her brush-tail swinging like a metronome, perched atop a stack of sweet-smelling barley sacks. "Merry Christmas Eve, you wee heathen," Fox greeted Morag, her voice a musical and mellow tune. "Ready to ditch the hearthside snoozing for actual adventure?" Isla lowed softly in enthusiastic agreement, her large liquid eyes wide in the semi-darkness. Morag arched her ginger back proudly. "Adventure beckons, and I know precisely where." Her green eyes gleamed like polished holly berries. "The village. Tonight's the night." Fox's ears pricked forward instantly. "The tree? Finally?" The annual village Christmas tree, a towering spruce hauled down from the hills every year, was legendary for its arrival. Due to the awful storms earlier in the autumn, there had been a big delay in this year's tree arriving, and as a result, everyone was so extra excited for it to finally be there, right in the heart of the town. Rumours flew amongst the local wildlife about its size, its decorations, and the sheer chaos surrounding its erection. Isla nudged Morag affectionately with her woolly head, nearly knocking the cat sideways. "Oh, please say we're going. I've never seen it lit up proper." The prospect of glittering baubles and shimmering lights held an irresistible allure for the young cow. Fox hopped down gracefully, landing with barely a whisper. She then declared, "Right then, lead the way, Majesty Morag, to witness the glorious, probably stressful spectacle." The trio set off, a mismatched parade under the vast, star-strewn Scottish sky. Morag trotting purposefully in front, a beacon of ginger determination, like Blackhill Farm's Rudolph leading the sleigh. Fox weaved silently beside her, russet fur blending with the moonlit shadows, and Isla clopping happily behind, her fluffy flanks brushing frost from the overgrown hedgerows. The crisp air carried distant sounds, the faint jingle of a collar bell from a neighbour's dog, the muted thrum of a generator humming somewhere deep in the farmhouse cellar, and far, far off, the rhythmic clank of the community hall boiler. Either that or an ancient archaic steam train, but both were known to be quite similar to each other. Their route skirted the frosty sheep fields, dipped into the shallow, icy burn they crossed on stepping stones. They were slick with frost, and they climbed a gentle rise. As they crested it, the distant twinkle of village lights came into view, nestled like scattered jewels in the valley below. The scent shifted subtly. Wood and coal smoke mingled with the distant tang of the seashore carried on by the breeze. They paused, catching their breath. Morag's whiskers twitched as she savoured the anticipation prickling the air. "Nearly there," she hissed, her voice barely louder than the crunch of frost under Isla's hooves. Dropping low, they skirted the village outskirts, sticking to frost-dusted gardens and the deep shadows cast by stone cottages draped in twinkling fairy lights. Their destination was the village hall, its car park usually empty, but tonight pulsing with unexpected life. They squeezed beneath a prickly hawthorn hedge bordering the car park, finding the perfect vantage point, a dense thicket offering cover while granting them a clear view. Though how much cover a dense thicket really gave a Highland cow, no one will really know. The scene unfolding was worthy of the legends Fox had whispered about. A massive, diesel-spewing truck idled noisily, its exhaust fumes smelling sharply of burnt oil and pine resin against the clean night air. Strapped firmly to its flatbed stood a colossal spruce, its trunk thicker than Isla in her entirety, and its branches brushing the truck's roof. Pine needles littered the tarmac around it like emerald snow. A small crowd of villagers, wrapped in thick scarves and knitted hats, their breath puffing white clouds into the chilly air, clustered nearby, chatting excitedly. Some sipped steaming drinks from thermos flasks that perfumed the air with cocoa and cinnamon. Several stoudy folk were carefully manoeuvring the tree upright into a waiting trolley, shouting instructions muffled by the engine's rumble.
Heave, John! Steady on right there! Watch the fairy lights, Cable Stewart! Mind your head! Oh, now, come on!
Morag's eyes widened like saucers, not just at the majestic tree being expertly eased to the ground amidst cheers, but at the truck bed itself. Behind the giant spruce lay a tangled forest in miniature. 6, 7, 8 more smaller trees strapped down. Their fresh pine scent mingled powerfully with the smell of the engine. So many, Isla breathed, utterly enchanted. Fox twitched her whiskers. Each one for someone? Spares, probably. Either that or for those very posh people with the huge mansion. They probably need 6 just for their foyer, or for each of their fancy big dining rooms. Driven by feline wonder, Morag couldn't resist. While villagers fussed over the main tree's positioning, debating where the star should go, she darted from a hedge, a silent streak of ginger.
Higher! Higher, Jimmy! Ah, it'll blow straight off from there. What are you doing?
She leapt nimbly onto the truck's rear bumper, then scrambled onto the bed itself. Up close, the bundled trees felt like strange, fragrant mountains. She padded cautiously amongst them, inhaling deeply. Damp earth, soothing and sappy pine. Total bliss. It was an entire miniature forest captured on wheels. She nestled momentarily into the soft needles of the smaller spruce, purring softly at the novelty. Suddenly, the truck engine roared back to life, a startling thunderclap in the crisp night. The driver, oblivious to his stowaway and mission accomplished, slammed his door shut. Gears ground loudly, metal protesting. Morag's head snapped up, green eyes wide. Before she could even consider leaping off, the monstrous vehicle lurched forward violently. She scrambled, claws scraping desperately on the cold metal, trying to grip anything. The smaller trees shifted and slid slightly as momentum took hold. Morag! Fox's sharp yelp cut through the engine's rumble, but it was too distant, too late. Isla's panicked low echoed faintly. The truck sped up, leaving the village hall and her bewildered friends shrinking rapidly behind her. The village lights vanished around a bend. Morag flattened herself low against a scratchy bark, wedged between 2 trunks, whiskers flattened by the rushing wind. Frosty fields blurred past under the pale moonlight. This adventure was certainly unexpected, but suddenly and very achingly, Morag felt alone. Usually her adventures, no matter how mad they'd ended up being, had been her doing, and she'd had her friends with her. But under the cold night sky, in the back of this speeding truck to goodness knows where, she missed her friends desperately. She missed Fox. She missed Isla. She missed all the other wonderful animals she called her bestest friends. Gammy the deer, Patch the cat, and all the other wee furry folk and beasties of Black Hill. But most of all, on this cold and starry night, she missed her Rose. Fox and Isla stared after the disappearing truck, its red tail lights winking mockingly down the frost-silenced lane. The stink of smoky diesel and pine needles lingered, sharp and unpleasant, against the clean air of the night. "Where did it?" Isla breathed, her fluffy head tilted in complete bewilderment. Fox flattened her ears, a low growl rumbling in her throat. "That confounded metal beast stole our Morag." Panic began to flutter beneath Isla's thick hide. "What do we do? We promised Rose we'd take care of her forever and ever and ever. I mean, she doesn't know that, but we've promised her inside." The barn suddenly felt leagues away, but Fox nudged the calf gently towards the shadows. "Home first. Thinking requires fewer frost-bitten hooves." The journey back felt longer, quieter even. The magic of the starlit, frosted fields had vanished, replaced by an anxious silence punctuated only by the heavy crunch of Isla's steps and Fox's soft padding. The barn welcomed them with its comforting smells, warm sheep wool, dry hay and dusty barley sacks, but they didn't feel quite as comforting as before. Fox paced atop the sacks, her reddish fur catching slivers of moonlight filtering through the cracks. "No way I could track that racket. And Morag, she's cleverer than a bucket full of badgers. She'll jump off as soon as it slows down, won't she?" The uncertainty hung thickly in the air. Isla shuffled miserably near the entrance, gazing towards the distant farmhouse. "Jump off? Onto what? A motorway? A cliff? A chip shop?" Her imagination painted increasingly alarming scenarios involving lorries, deep ravines, and suspiciously fragrant deep fat friars. Isla pressed her velvety nose against the barn door crack, peering towards Black Hill Farm. A solitary light glowed upstairs. Rose's window. Inside, Isla saw the girl moving, her silhouette small and restless against the warm yellow lamplight. Rose paced slowly, her movements sleepy but deliberate. She peered under the bedskirt, lifted a pillow, scanned the rocking chair. Her posture slumped slightly, a picture of confused concern. Isla watched, her own worry deepening, picturing Morag tucked safely away on a hearthrug that seemed continents away now. Oh, Fox. She can't find her the new, of course, but what about when she can't find her on Christmas morning? She'll be so sad. Fox, refusing to succumb to dread, stroked Isla softly on her fluffy wee head and looked deep into her eyes. Don't worry, hen. We'll sort this. I have an idea. I'll go and find some help. We're going to need a sled and a rescue party. So just you keep an eye on Rose for the time being. She'll appreciate the company, even if she doesn't know you're out here. I'll be back soon. And just like that, Fox vanished into the moonlit paddock like smoke. Her form flowed silently past lumbering sheep mounds and frost-etched fence posts. She headed for the cluster of ancient oak trees bordering the west pasture. Isla thought to herself, a sled? Like Santa's big sled? She really hoped Fox would find help, for Isla felt a little helpless. But nevertheless, Isla did as Fox instructed, and kept a watchful eye on Rose through the barn door, doing her best to transmit or conduct or wish for as much warmth and cuddles and love into Rose's arms as she could possibly conjure, even if she had none left for herself. That was just Isla doing as Isla did. Meanwhile, high above the frozen expanse of Canada's northern wilderness, Santa's sleigh carved a silent arc through the ink-black sky. The reindeer team surged forward with powerful, rhythmic strides, their breath freezing instantly into shimmering trails that caught the magical starlight. Below, the endless white landscape stretched like a crumpled quilt, broken only by dark patches of forest and the occasional frozen lake gleaming like a shard of dropped obsidian. Santa leaned back against the worn leather seat, the familiar creak a comforting counterpoint to the whoosh of wind past the runners. He patted the smooth wood beside him. "Steady as she goes, Prancer," he murmured, though only the deer could hear the quiet confidence in his tone. "That thermos of Mrs. Claus's cocoa is calling our names. Hey! Strong enough to melt the ice caps, bless her." He chuckled away to himself, adjusting his spectacles as he scanned the horizon for the next cluster of twinkling cottage lights. One gloved hand dipped into the seemingly bottomless sack beside him, a feat of magical logistics that still occasionally surprised him after all these centuries. He pulled out a weathered scroll, its edges softened by time and countless journeys. Unfurling it gently against his knee, his eyes danced down the meticulously inked columns. "Ah, young Timothy Abernethy," he mused aloud, his voice barely louder than the sigh of the wind through the reindeer's harnesses. "He requested 3 tubs of industrial strength tangy Haribo sweets. Bold choice, lad." He tapped the scroll thoughtfully. "Suppose we best include that dentist appointment voucher Mrs. Claus typed up for you. Clever lass, anticipating all inevitable sticky catastrophes, that woman. Couldn't do without her." His finger traced further down again. "Eloise Chang. Now, what's she after? Miniature astrophysics lab." He grinned, picturing the intricate constellation projector the North Pole Workshop elves had crafted. "Blimey, kids must be getting smarter these days. The things they are after, eh, Rudolph? We'll need to make sure that nebula simulator doesn't short-circuit the neighbour's toaster again, eh?" He made a tiny, invisible tick mark beside her name with his thumb. The crisp Arctic air carried the faintest scent of woodland sap, drifting up from the boreal forests far below, mingling pleasantly with the familiar leather and frost smell of the sleigh. Santa scanned the endless white expanse, spotting the distant town of North Bay, Ontario. His gaze drifted back to the list, a comforting rhythm settling in. He chuckled softly to himself as he did so. Jasper Peterson, still firmly on the nice list, bless him. Asking for socks that miraculously repel muddy paws. He patted the sack fondly with a knowing nod. Managed something waterproof, furry-proof, and featuring tiny embroidered badgers.
Hope Mrs. Peterson appreciates the dry floors now.
He then frowned slightly, adjusting his spectacles.
Now, the Henderson twins. Technically naughty for that incident with the garden gnomes and the treacle. However, their apology carrot cake to their dear mother was exceptionally moist.
He leaned back, stroking his beard.
Perhaps leniency with a side of gnome repair kits and or cleaning wipes. What do you think? Balanced ledger, Prancer. Balanced ledger.
The sleigh banked gently over Sleeping Giant Provincial Park, its slow, snow-draped ridges resembling a slumbering titan under the stars. Rudolph's nose cast a warm, rosy glow across the icy treetops below, illuminating silent owls perched like feathered watchers of the night. Santa hummed a jaunty, wordless tune, the melody carried away by the wind whistling past the sleigh runners.
Next stop. Looks like our wee bonny Scotland. Always my favourite time of the night. Go, Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, and Vixen! Away we go, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen! Lead the way, Rudolph!
All was calm, all was bright. The familiar rhythm of Christmas Eve magic thrumming through the frosty air. All except for Morag the cat and Rose, who, unbeknownst to both her and Santa Claus, was only a few hours away from waking up to her best friend being missing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity rattling over frost-heaved roads, the lumbering truck shuddered to a halt. Morag peered cautiously through a gap in the bundled trees. They'd arrived at a sprawling garden centre nestled on the outskirts of a slumbering town. Its vast greenhouses, dark and silent under the stars. The scent of resin intensified as burly men began unloading the trees, grunting and manoeuvring trolleys across the crunchy gravel yard. Seizing her moment, Morag slithered down the truck's cold metal flank like liquid ginger, landing silently in the shadow of a towering rhododendron bush. She watched the men carry the majestic spruces towards a festive display area, then vanished into the welcoming gloom of a covered entranceway draped with jolly holly garlands and warm patio heaters, which still retained a bit of the heat from the earlier day. Though in spite of this, the lingering chill bit deeper here in the shadows, away from the truck's idling engine warmth. Morag tucked her paws tightly beneath her, seeking refuge behind a stack of terracotta pots, smelling a little like the damp clay they were made of. Her breath misted the air as she scanned the empty courtyard. Then a tiny rustle echoed from beneath a nearby display of frost-dusted poinsettias. Several pairs of bright, jet-black eyes appeared, followed by the emergence of 3 plump mice, their grey fur sleek and well-groomed. They regarded the stranger with polite curiosity, noses twitching delicately, whiskers shimmering slightly in the dim light reflected from distant street lamps. Morag, despite the cold and the distance from home, couldn't help but feel the flicker of amusement at their orderly appearance. She stretched slowly, projecting a calmness she didn't entirely feel, and began grooming a paw meticulously. The mice watched this ritual with quiet interest, using subtle shifts of her tail, expressive tilts of her head, and soft, meaningful blinks. Morag conveyed her tale. The sudden truck ride, the bewildering journey away from familiar fields and barns, the deep ache for Rose and her frantic friends left behind. Her posture, usually regally upright, sagged slightly at the memory, conveying vulnerability without a single meow. The trio of mice exchanged rapid glances, whiskers twitching silently. One nudged a small, frost-crisped leaf towards Morag, a tiny offering. Then, with synchronized efficiency, they scurried into motion. The plumpest mouse took the lead, darting confidently between displays of ceramic reindeer and coiled hoses smelling faintly of rubber. Another kept pace beside Morag, pausing frequently to ensure the disoriented cat was following. The third brought up the rear, whiskers vigilant. They moved like a furry, well-rehearsed escort through the quiet garden centre. The rather wonderful smell of tree mulch deepened as they passed stacked bags, mingling with the cold tang of metal shelving. Morag felt the gravel shift softly beneath her paws, then to smooth tarmac as they slipped beneath a low gate. Emerging onto a deserted high street felt jarringly vast after the enclosed garden centre. Frost glistened on cobblestones, and lampposts cast long, lonely pools of yellow light onto pavements striped with crisp shadows. The mice led Morag past darkened shop windows. A bakery, smelling faintly of yesterday's bread. The butchers with cheerful painted sausages on the sign. The newsagent festooned with garish posters promising holiday bargains. The air was bitingly cold, carrying distant hints of chimney smoke and the briny, salty smell of the sea that wasn't all too far away, she supposed. The lead mouse paused beside a frosty stone bench near the village war memorial. It gestured emphatically with its tiny pink nose towards the centerpiece. The enormous, newly erected Christmas tree standing proud in the square, its pine scent strong even here, even stronger still than those in the bed of the truck. Fairy lights blinked sporadically where they hadn't been properly secured. This, the mouse seemed to convey with its whole tiny posture, was the landmark where her friends would surely look, should they come to find her. Morag dipped her head low, her ginger fur ruffled by icy breeze. She touched her nose gently to each mouse's tiny head in silent, profound gratitude. The trio blinked, whiskers trembling with pride, then vanished like grey vapour back into the shadowy gap beneath a nearby bookshop door, leaving Morag utterly alone against the immense backdrop of the quiet square sprinkled in soft fairy light glow. She sighed. A small puff of mist. The tree loomed, magnificent, yet somehow terribly lonely without Fox's commentary or Isla's thrilled gasps. A profound pang of homesickness washed over her. She missed the gentle rasp of Fox grooming her head, or the solid warmth of Isla leaning against her, the comforting, thrumming purr she always reserved for Rose. Then a wave of warmth washed over the frosty air. The heavy oak doors of the village church swung wide, releasing a tide of villagers bundled in thick coats and scarves. They spilled onto the cobbled square, forming a cheerful circle around the towering tree. Laughter mingled with the crunch of footsteps on frozen ground. One man struck a tuning fork with a clear, pure ping that seemed to hang in the crystalline air. The crowd stilled, breaths misting in unison, and softly, almost hesitantly, their voices rose into the frosty night. The melody curled upwards, wrapping around Morag like a warm woolen blanket she hadn't known she needed. The sound was rich and layered, like that of warm wool, cinnamon dust, and candle smoke. It filled the square, pushing back the vast emptiness she felt. The pure and harmonious sound washed over her, finding the cold, lonely place inside and warming it slowly, like morning sun thawing the frost. Drawn irresistibly by the shared warmth and the melody's embrace, Morag padded silently forward on velvet paws, weaving through forest green trouser legs and thick knitted skirts. She stopped just outside the circle, gazing up at the singers lit by the trees' twinkling lights and the soft glow spilling from the church windows. A woman near the edge, her cheeks rosy from the cold and the singing, noticed the small ginger cat gazing upwards. Her eyes softened instantly, crinkling at the corners. She interrupted her own caroling with a gentle chuckle, bending down without breaking the rhythm of the hymn.
Well, hello there, wee wanderer,
she murmured, her voice barely audible above the rising chorus. Before Morag could even twitch a whisker in surprise, strong, gentle hands scooped her up, lifting her from the cold cobbles. The sudden warmth of the woman's woolen coat against her fur was blissful. Then, with a flourish and a hearty laugh that echoed the caroller's spirits, the woman plucked a bright red hat with a fluffy white bauble from her own pocket.
Aha! Just the very thing for our little choir mascot.
The scrunched hat was placed snugly, perhaps a little lopsidedly, upon Morag's head, the bauble bouncing cheerfully above her perplexed green eyes. The woman beamed, holding Morag aloft slightly for the singers nearby to see.
There now, look lively, everyone. The real spirit of Christmas has graced our humble village square.
Her proclamation was met with delighted chuckles and murmurs of approval rippling through the choir. Morag blinked, momentarily stunned. The hat felt ridiculous, scratchy against her ears, the bauble wobbling with every tiny movement, but somehow she felt an immediate urge to start batting it, but she resisted. Ridiculous, yes, but warm, absolutely. The scratchy wool muffled the worst of the icy breeze. Around her, the carolers' voices swelled again. Their collective warmth radiated outwards, enveloping her like a thick jumper stolen from a radiator. Then out of nowhere, the skies above gave way to the gentlest of snowfall. Fat flakes catching the fairy lights and glittering like sequins as they drifted down onto her ginger fur and the ridiculous bauble hat. Despite the absurdity of her attire and the lingering ache for Rose, Morag felt an unexpected wave of contentment wash over her. For a few precious moments, nestled in the crook of the woman's arm amidst the voices and the falling snow, Morag wasn't a lost cat. She was simply there, bathed in the communal glow of the season. The woman hummed along, her thumb rhythmically stroking between Morag's ears beneath the hat's edge, adding another layer of unexpected comfort. After the final notes faded, the crowd dispersed slowly, exchanging hushed greetings and shuffling off towards warm houses which smelled of that evening's roast dinners and other festive treats. The woman herself deposited Morag gently back onto the frosty cobbles near the church wall, chuckling softly as she adjusted the lopsided hat. "There you go, wee soldier. Right, be off home with you now. You have yourself a very Merry Christmas." Before Morag could even muster a protest, the woman vanished into the departing throng. Left alone once more, Morag sniffed the air. The glorious scent of something rich and fishy suddenly teased her nostrils. Discarded remnants of someone's pre-carol supper, perhaps? The aroma led her to a discreetly placed cardboard box tucked beside the church's stone buttresses. She prized it open with a paw, and inside, nestled amidst crumpled paper smelling faintly of vinegar, lay treasure, a generous portion of cold, flaky haddock, a few crispy chips, and a dollop of mushy peas. A proper fish supper. Result. At that point, Morag was absolutely certain that Santa had read her letter. Magical it was, this fortuitous feast. She tucked in gratefully, the fish dissolving deliciously on her tongue, momentarily banishing thoughts of geography and logistics. The bobble hat, absurdly perched atop her head, bobbed gently as she ate. She even gave the mushy peas a good go. Not usual for your typical cat. Licking her lips, belly nice and full, thankfully, she padded into the square, gazing up at the shining star atop the tree. She wished more than anything to be home, safe and sound, but honestly had no idea what to do next. And so she wished, and she wished, and she wished upon the star. Not just any star, but the star atop the tree, the star which twinkled bright in the glittery, fluffy, snowy night. But then something strange and vaguely magical seemed to happen. The golden twinkle of the star began to glow. The glow began to grow. A bright red glow. Santa's sleigh descended towards the village square like a silent, frost-kissed feather, Rudolph's nose bathing the cobbles in a warm and rosy blush. The reindeer touched down with practiced grace, their hooves scarcely scraping the frost-dusted stones. Santa, already scanning his scroll for the next chimney, paused mid-unfurl. His snowy eyebrows shot up towards his fur-trimmed hat rim. There, directly beneath the glittering Christmas tree, sat a small, decisively festive ginger cat. But not just any cat. This one wore a bright red bobble hat perched lopsidedly atop its head, just like his own, in fact. The fluffy white pom-pom wobbling absurdly with every twitch of an ear. Recognition dawned slowly, then hit him like a rogue snowball. Morag, of Black Hill Farm, Rose's cherished companion. But what in the name of chocolate orange cocoa was she doing here, miles from her Highland hearth, sporting headgear more suited to a tipsy elf, or himself, for that matter?
Good heavens, you wee soul, Morag! What are you doing out here in the snow, so far away from home? I've not even got yourself on the rose yet.
He let out a low chuckle, the sound puffing into the frigid air. This was a delightful, bewildering curveball in the usually predictable flight plan. Setting aside Timothy Abernethy's fizzy Haribo conundrum, Santa leaned forward, adjusting his spectacles for a clearer look. Morag looked up, her green eyes wide and startled in Rudolph's gentle glow, a slightly damp whisker still flecked with a stray of mushy pea. He noted the faint scent of fish supper clinging to her fur, mixing oddly with pine and the icy cold. The sheer improbability of it. A Scottish farm cat turned accidental choir mascot, clearly, adrift in a foreign square, tickled his merry spirit, so it did. It was a scene brimming with gentle absurdity, far removed from mere jam volcanoes or jig-dancing coups, yet utterly perfect nonetheless. Morag froze for a heartbeat. Then recognition sparked brighter than the tree lights. This bearded, rosy-cheeked figure radiating warmth and familiarity wasn't some ordinary villager. It was him, the big man, the bringer of warmth and cheer, the deliverer of dream sparkles and, well, fish suppers. With a squeak that wasn't quite a meow, she launched herself forward, a blur of ginger fur and bouncing bobble. Her paws landed lightly on the worn leather of his boot. Instantly a rumbling purr erupted from her chest, loud enough to rival the distant chimes of the village clock striking midnight. She rubbed her cheek fiercely against the coarse red fabric of his trousers, her entire small body vibrating with utter relief and adoration. She knew then, deep in her fish supper satisfied belly, that everything was going to be absolutely, wonderfully fine. The terrifying truck ride, the bewildering darkness of the garden centre, the lonely cobbles, it all faded beneath the immense, comforting presence of Christmas incarnate. One enormous, gentle hand scooped her up effortlessly, hat and all, lifting her to eye level. Her ridiculous pom-pom bobbed wildly. Santa's kind eyes, twinkling like chips of glacier ice, held hers.
Lost whiskers and found hats, have we? Farther from home than a snowflake in July, so you are. I've got a few houses that I need to visit here, so I won't be long. But then we can go about getting you safely back. How about that, wee Morag?
Then, as if on cue, something caught their eyes. A sled, decidedly homemade and wobbling slightly, emerged from the lane beside the butcher's shop. Pulling it with surprising determination was Isla, the baby calf, her shaggy ginger coat dusted with snow and steam puffing from her nostrils in determined little clouds. Beside her, gamely leaning into the harness straps, trotted none other than Gammy the wee deer, her knobbly knees protesting only slightly. Riding the sled, clinging to its rough wooden rails with paws and claws, were Fox and Morag's dear friend, the white and brown tomcat named Patch, his fur slightly askew from the frantic journey. Fox grinned, her tongue lolling.
Told you we'd find her, Patch.
Saw Rudolph's nose glow clear across 3 fields. Knew that had to mean trouble, or, well, Christmas, Isla began to bound wildly at the sight of Morag, which sent the sled and the others with it this way and that as they tried to keep the sled, which Rose and her dad made, pointing upright.
Morag! Oh my goodness, I was so worried we'd lost you.
We began following the tracks of the truck. Then it started snowing, and we lost them.
But thank heavens we saw Rudolph's nose.
Morag's purr bubbled louder than a boiling kettle as Isla's floppy ears bounced wildly towards her, dragging the sled like a furry tugboat captain navigating festive rapids. Fox bounded ahead, skidding to a halt beside Santa's boot with a triumphant smirk.
Managed to steer this slot here without Isla mistaking a lamppost for a giant carrot.
She panted proudly, her tail held high. Santa, bewildered and bamboozled, looked down upon these animal pals with the biggest smile on his face. The fox appeared to be yapping something up at him, but of course he didn't understand her. He'd witnessed some magical things in his years, but nothing quite as magical and strange as this eclectic crew coming to the rescue of a cat. Nay, Morag, the cat no less. Patch wobbled off the sled, shaky-legged but grinning.
By the looks of you, seems like you've joined a travelling circus,
he chirped, eyeing Morag's bobbly Santa hat. Gammy limped forwards, head low and modest.
It's so good to see you, Morag. As soon as I heard, I was right there.
I may not be as fast as Santa's reindeer, but somebody had to give Isla a hand. Gammy winked, watching Isla still prancing about in glee. Morag nudged each friend fiercely with her nose, lingering longest on Isla's warm, hay-scented flank. Home wasn't a place. It was this chaotic, whiskered, hooved constellation gathered under Rudolph's rosy spotlight. Santa chuckled, a sound like distant sleigh bells muffled in velvet. He gestured towards the bulging sacks nestled in his sleigh.
Well, whilst you're all here and keen as beans, what say yous all give me a wee hand delivering the presents, eh?
He tossed Morag a miniature sack patterned with tiny embroidered fish bones. Fox received one adorned with cunning foxglove flowers. Patch a tartan-patched pouch. Isla a sturdy canvas sack smelling like the malted barley she loved so much. And Gammy a soft velvet one, smelling of her own meadow flowers.
Right, off we trot, team. Isla, Gammy, don't ask me how I seem to know your names, I just do. You two seem to know your way around a harness. we'll need some hoof power. The rest of you, in yous pop.
What followed was a whirlwind of whispered paws, muffled hooves, and surprisingly efficient teamwork. With Gammy and Isla proudly, if slightly wobbly, taking the reins beneath Rudolph's approving guidance, the sleigh lifted off with astonishing grace. It skimmed rooftops like a ghostly leaf, depositing Santa, Morag, Fox and Patch onto snowy chimneys with precision. Down the chimneys they slithered, Santa moving with familiar ease, all the while hoovering up the mince pies, brandy and milk, whilst Morag tucked her bobble hat low to avoid soot smudges as best she could. Fox, naturally stealthy, vanished into darkened corners to deposit her foxglove sack gifts with silent aplomb. Patch, navigating unfamiliar parlours with cautious dignity, favoured placing tartan-patched parcels beside slumbering terriers or beneath ticking grandfather clocks. Morag, guided by pure instinct and her fishbone sack, favoured hearths, leaving her fishbone packages radiating warmth near the glowing embers for sleepy children to discover. She padded past stockings bulging with oranges and walnuts, depositing hers with a delicate thump beside a snoozing spaniel who merely twitched but did not wake. The quiet rhythm of the deliveries was punctuated only by Santa's soft chuckles and the muffled echoes of distant carols drifting through frosted window panes. Over sleeping villages and frost-locked farms they swept, the night air biting crisp, yet filled with peace. Rudolph's nose cast its reassuring ruby pool over snowy gardens, illuminating frozen bird baths and lonely park benches. As the last parcel disappeared beneath a tiny fir tree decorated with painted pine cones, Santa sighed contentedly, patting the now smaller sacks beside him. The eastern horizon held the faintest blush of pre-dawn light, painting the snowy rooftops pearly grey and rose. Below, the world lay hushed and expectant. Gammy leaned against Isla for warmth, her breath frosting gently. The reindeer stamped their hooves softly on the rooftop tiles, and Santa, stroking Morag's head beneath her hat, gazed, resting on every weary, triumphant face. Fox with a smear of soot on her nose, Patch meticulously smoothing his ruffled fur once again, and Isla blinking sleepily yet proudly. Gammy radiating quiet satisfaction.
Well now, that's the last stocking stuffed. and the final mince pie sampled. Well, for now at least. Thank you all for helping me and the reindeer. You've all done a sensational job. The best Christmas Eve team I've certainly ever witnessed. Now, what say we get you all home and pay Rose a wee visit?
The sleigh dipped low over Blackhill Farm as dawn threatened to paint the highlands in streaks of apricot and lavender. Rudolph's glow faded gently, replaced by the soft, pearly light spilling over snow-laden heather and the familiar slate roof. Gammy and Isla touched down with delicacy on the frosted front lawn, the homemade sled bumping softly behind them. Santa whisked Morag from the sleigh basket, her bobble hat miraculously still perched askew above wide but weary eyes. Fox leapt nimbly down, shaking dew from her fur, whilst Patch stretched luxuriously before nudging Gammy's shoulder in quiet teamwork thanks. Inside the farmhouse, Rose stirred, eyes pinging open in excitement as soon as she realized Christmas Day. Pulling her thick dressing gown tight against the morning chill, she padded barefoot downstairs, drawn by an unusual stillness, and perhaps a faint, lingering scent of warm fur and Christmas tree sap. She blinked sleep from her eyes as she pushed open the kitchen door. There, bathed in the golden light streaming through the window, stood Santa Claus himself, dwarfing the sturdy oak table. Around him clustered her beloved animals, Morag purring fiercely against his boot, Fox wagging her tail like a metronome, Patch grooming a stray bit of soot from his paw, Gammy leaning placidly against the doorframe, and Isla, utterly starry-eyed, gazing up at the legendary visitor with an expression of pure bovine adoration. A half-eaten mince pie sat beside a steaming mug of cocoa on the table. Rose froze, one hand still on the doorknob, her breath catching in a cloud of disbelief.
Merry Christmas, Rose. How wonderful to see you again. I'm sorry I'm visiting a little later than I'd planned, but I ran into some friends of yours. These lot have done a wonderful thing tonight, and I imagine your wee pal Morag is most thankful for them.
Rose's eyes darted from Santa's rosy cheeks to Morag's ridiculous hat, then to the triumphant, dirt-smudged faces of Fox, Patch, Isla, and Gammy. A choked gasp escaped her, followed by a delighted squeal that startled a sleepy pigeon on the windowsill. She flung herself forward, not bothering with words. First, she scooped up Morag, burying her face in the cat's fish-scented fur and scratchy wool of the hat. "Morag, oh you wee silly Billy," she whispered, tears of relief mixing with laughter. Then she hugged Fox fiercely around the neck. "Clever Fox, clever, clever Fox." Ruffled Patch's fur. "You brave soul, you." Pressed her cheek to Gammy's soft nose. "My little wonder fawn." And finally flung her arms around Isla's sturdy neck, nearly knocking the calf off her snowy hooves. "My little gentle giant." The kitchen filled with purrs, happy grunts, and Isla's muffled, joyful against Rose's dressing gown. Santa watched, eyes twinkling brighter than ever before.
Now, Rose, I believe I promised you some extra luxurious cocoa.
He chuckled, pulling out a chair that, miraculously, didn't groan under his weight. Soon, after the click of a finger, 2 steaming mugs sat on the table. One filled with rich, dark cocoa sprinkled with cinnamon, which was Rose's. The other brimming with creamy, orange-infused warmth, Santa's. He took a hearty bite of another homemade mince pie. Who's keeping count? Crumbs dusting his beard like snowflakes.
Perfection. It doesn't get any better than this. Nearly as good as Mrs. Claus's. But don't you tell her I said that.
He winked, popping the rest of the pie into his mouth, whilst Rose sipped her cocoa, her eyes wide, still trying to grasp the impossible scene. Santa Claus, once again, drinking cocoa in her kitchen. If you'd have told her this would happen but a couple of years ago, she would have never believed you. Soon, it was time for Santa to leave before the day got too bright. So Rose went outside to greet and stroke all of the reindeer before he hopped back in his sleigh and shot off into the sky with a stream of icy snow crystals in his wake. Rose and all of her furry friends watched on before retreating back into the cosy warmth of Black Hill Farm cottage. After such a long night filled with adventure, it wasn't long before Morag and her Rose were curled up in their favourite squishy chair by the fire, dozing as happy as could be. Oh, and of course, Gammy the deer, Patch the cat, Fox the fox, and Isla the baby Highland cow were all there too, just as curled up, just as happy, and just as cosy on that merry Christmas morning. Now, whose job would it be to gift Isla some flying goggles for next year?
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, everyone! Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night! Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Ho, ho, ho!